Share, is it going to play up? No. Okay, Teams, please play along today. Please play along today. Oh, there we are. Right, you should all be seeing data quality meeting 1. So we're going to do the usual, do our round the room icebreaker, just making sure that everyone's knows who everyone else is on the call. And then the plan for today, we'll do the standard little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to go through and talk about data quality, and then run a little feedback corner. Now, I will curse myself like I did last time and say, this might be a short meeting. And we will all roll with laughter at 2 hours, 10 minutes when we finally finish this meeting. But I'm going to curse myself and say this might be a short meeting. So let me bring up my list of people. I've got this all shared. I've got this recorded. Right. So I'm going to go from the top down on my list, but I will go first. Hey, I'm Dr. J. I use they as a pronoun. I am from DFT. I'm acting as the service owner for NaPTAN. I'm a consultant from ThoughtWorks. And I've forgotten to change the icebreaker. We'll still stick with favourite type of bus, but you can't be the same one you said last time. So my second favourite type of bus to move around London is not the double deckers that I said last time. It's the little one-door community buses or two-door community buses that the C10 uses and the 360 used to use. They're kind of little single deckers with one door to go in and one door to go out, and they're fabulous little community buses in London that take all the little back routes and are really used to take me from my house almost door to door to a pub that was just down the road from a friend's, and then to another pub where I used to go to some shows at. So it was kind of like the perfect little door to door, but looped around all the back streets for me. So, Andy, I will hand over to you.
Hi, I'm Andy Hole.
Yep.
I'm Andy Hole. I am he, him. I am from National PTI. My favourite type of bus, I think I said it last time. I might have said it last time. The open top bus that goes around Paignton area.
So you can't choose
really
the
have
same
a
bus
second
as last.
favourite.
You don't have a second favourite. How can you not like two buses?
I try to avoid them. Unfortunately, I can only make the first half of this meeting, so I'm on the second half of the next meeting as well. So I'll do a split meeting if that's okay.
That will be fine. It'll be interesting to see what comes up with you being involved in both meetings. Fantastic. Bibi, you're the next one up.
Hi, thanks, Jay. Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Bibi. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the product owners on NaPTAN, and I work for DFT. And I'm going to change my favourite route actually today. I like the number 11 in London because it goes, I think, from East London all the way through central London to the other side, somewhere in West. And it's a really nice route because you see some of the, the Tower of London and other places as you sit on the bus. So, yeah, I really like that one. Thank you.
It's a very cheap sightseeing bus from memory. It's one of the ones of all the people who spend money to go on the big tour double deckers, and you can literally sit on the top of the 11 and get like 2/3 of the route.
It really does, yeah. All the sights of London you can get just for £1.75 or £1.80 for a trip.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bibi. Deborah, you're the next one up. You're still on mute. We're having fun with mute, okay? Take your time. It's totes cool.
Sorry about that. Having trouble with my mouse. My name's Deborah. I work for TFW. My pronoun is her, she. And I'm a journey controller with TFW. My favourite bus route, I will probably have to say the 118 in the Gower, Swansea.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Jonathan Bigwood, you're the next one up.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Bigwood. I'm he, him. I work for Central Bedfordshire Council and look after our travel line data and roadside publicity, and also the same for our neighbours at Bedford and Luton boroughs. Favourite type of bus? I gave an answer last time, but you said it's got to be different. So second favourite type of bus, I'll be more technical rather than a bus route. I'll go for the type of Leyland Leopard that was built for the Scottish Bus Group. Alexander bodywork for about 20 years, from 1960 to 1980. For the simple reason I did my bus driver training and test on one of them some years ago.
I love the way that Chris nodded with that recognition of knowing exactly which bus you were talking about. I love the geekiness of this group when it comes to buses. Pete, you're the next one up.
I'm Pete. I'm not employed by a local authority, but I'm sure a number of you probably heard from me. I kind of find a lot of NaPTAN data errors and forward them into you guys. So I've kind of got an interest in NaPTAN from that. My favourite bus would be the Wright streetcars that used to operate between Bradford and Leeds, the bendy buses, and they were revolutionary for their time.
Thanks, Pete. Sorry, I didn't catch your pronoun in there.
Sorry, he, him.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Robert, Robert, yeah, you're the next one up. Sorry, I was just double checking I'd called the right name.
No worries. Hi, everyone. I'm Robert Wilson. My pronouns are he, him. I work as a project officer for travel information for HyTran. So that's a region covering the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. My favourite bus is actually an international one. In Bremen in Germany, they have this lovely council-run bendy bus that goes around the kind of countryside, so you get to see a lot of the sights. And yeah, I definitely agree. Bendy buses in general are just, I don't know, they always feel like they just go round routes much more smoothly, I find. So always quite like them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I have tales of bendy buses in London. I will tell one when we get to the end here. Roger, you're the next one up.
Hi, Roger Court, he, him. I'm from Kent County Council. I'm the information team manager, which means we keep track of all the scheduling data for the area. Favourite type of bus? I mean, I've got fond memories of clapped out Atlanteans on the school run as a kid, but I'm going to be boring. I'm going to say it's the modern low-floor single-deckers like the Enviros. I'm just really impressed with how easy they are to move around inside for the size of the vehicle. I just love them.
Fantastic. I get a sense they might be the ones that I'm thinking of that run. They're quite modern, low-floor ones that run around here as well. Who knows? I'll go do a double check. Tansy, you're the next one up.
Hi everyone, I'm Tansy Appleby. I'm the journey manager at Transport for Wales. I use she, her pronouns, and my favourite type of bus. I don't know technically what they're called, but they're the fancy new electric ones they have on the X3030 route between Newport and Cardiff. They're so quiet, they're so comfortable, and they're so smooth. I think they're great. More electric buses.
Brilliant. Chris, you're the next one up.
Hi, I'm Chris Turner, Public Transport Officer at Scottish Borders Council. And yeah, you've definitely played into my wheelhouse with the favourite type of bus. My history, I'm actually trained as a mechanic on buses, so that was what I did before I came to the council. So yeah, I know quite a lot about buses. So my favourite one, I think I've got to say, it's going to be Scania L94s. Where I worked, we had a fleet of them that pounded the road between Edinburgh and Carlisle. Never really set a foot wrong. They would do, a million and a half miles without anything major going wrong in them. So bomb-proof they were.
Fantastic. Marta, you're the next one up. And then Dan, I will run back up to you.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm working for a local council, County Council. I work close with HyTrans, maintain stops on Diva. First time here, and actually I don't got favorite bus. Sorry, I will bring that to our next meeting.
And when I refer to you, Marta, should I use he, she, or they? Which pronoun do you prefer?
Oh, Sorry.
Should I use she when I refer to you?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Thank you so
Sorry,
much.
thank you.
No, that's fine. I'm also aware my accent can be, well, my accent is as wild as all the other accents here, but also slightly different because I'm from New Zealand. So if I talk too fast or you need a moment, just ask me to repeat myself and I'll do my best.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Dan Saunders, you're the last one up.
Hi, Dr. J. Yes, Dan Saunders. Apologies for being slightly late. My Virgin internet went down momentarily just as the meeting started, so that's always a useful time for that to happen. I'm a he, him. I'm from Basemap. We provide lots of kind of transport data for like the TNDS and things like that. My favourite type of bus is a Route Master, and it's because I went on the Route Master the other day, sat at the top floor, right at the front, felt like I was driving the bus. You can't really beat that kind of panoramic view across the front, looking out over everything. I still turn to a 10-year-old kid every time I sit up there, and I still get a little bit grumpy if someone sat in the front seats and I can't sit there. So yeah, there you go.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Right. So just very quickly, our plan for today, I'll run through the housekeeping super fast. I will, and all the previously on, and then we're going to focus on data quality. I'm going to talk about why we're focusing on data quality, kind of talk about some of the approaches that we might take, and then going to talk about what we're doing now, what we're going to do next, what we're thinking of doing later, and what's even later, and get your feedback on things that should be in there. And are we doing things in the right order? Some of the things we're tackling are just because they've come up as problems. Are there things that we could tackle that would solve future problems? Let's just start thinking about data quality. So first off, staying in contact with NaPTAN. We've got a YouTube channel. You can follow us on Eventbrite. There's a newsletter, and on our site. And please make it work today, because last time I did this, the site is up. We had a few issues. The team have been figuring out why it's been throwing a few spanners, and we're in the process of doing some upgrades. We've got all of the additional information for NaPTAN, and we're starting to pull all the different websites that are around into the single site, so that you won't be finding contradictory information about NaPTAN on 3 or 4 different government sites. Everything we're going to bring in and point to here. So that will take us some time to track them all down. If you find a site that's got NaPTAN information on, feel free to pass it on to me. It may or may not be on my list of sites to bring across. So, data quality. Everybody talks about the data quality in NaPTAN, and I know when I started in 2020, there'd been a publication, I think it was by Passenger, that talked about the accuracy of NaPTAN and produced a number of, I think it was 4% or 14% of the stops were not right, and all of this, and that drove a lot of push from people to try to fix NaPTAN, coming in from the outside and saying, we want this from you, we want that from you, you need to harden up on your stop names and things like this. You might know, and those who are aware, where the other thing with data quality is there was a lot of rigid rules that were put in, the business rules that were put in. These were outside of the schema, and these were put in various ways through a number of different tools, a number of different checkers. Some of them are off and are implemented in some of the tools that you have got, and these are all a whole pile of differing rules that conflicted. They were inconsistent. There were 3 or 4 about the same thing that had different values in them. And you might notice that we don't have any business rules now because we pulled them all out. And I know that was a big worry that NaPTAN's data quality would suffer. I don't think it has in an overall data quality, because we've become much more focused on making really good data. So that's kind of the approach that I wanted to just ensure that we're all on the same page with. So just talking about data quality, we've got Beryl. We all know Beryl. Beryl travelling to see Beverly. We've all met Beryl and Beverly multiple times on my calls. Beryl is travelling to see Beverly. This is Beryl's first time making this trip by public transport. So she is finding the stop for the first time. This is Beverly. Beverly has lived in the area a long time. She wants to tell Beryl the best stop to use. So this is all about our common name, our locality, and our indicators. So our common name tells us the name of the stop, e.g. post office. Locality tells me the where of the stop, e.g. weekly. And indicator tells me which of the two bus stops I want. And one of the indicator meetings ended up on a really, really nice model of just using A and B rather than opposite and adjacent and besides and in front of and behind, etc. Just using A and B. And it doesn't matter if half the world uses A on one side of the road and half the world uses B on the other side of the road, because the moment somebody turns around, the A and B are the other way around. So it's but it became it was a really nice model, and I want to look at it more and consider it more in the future as to how we might use that. But these three fields are combined by journey planners to name stops. But there are many, many other fields that we use within NaPTAN, and one of the things that I want to examine somewhat is what are the ones that are useful, what are the ones that aren't useful, what are the ones that 148 different people have tried 150 something different ways of using that field, and does it actually make sense for any journey planners? The people who are involved in this, I've kind of spelt them out. So we've got John, who does it all, who is our persona, our core persona for talking about who does things at a local authority. As John, who does it all for a local authority for NaPTAN, I want to be providing high quality data and putting my time into the right fields so that I am maximising the results for passengers of my work on NaPTAN. So hopefully for people like Andy and Jonathan, that describes you, what you're trying to do, and the value that you're trying to bring to NaPTAN. As Neil, who plans routes for a large bus company, I want to be able to easily select the right stops for my routes so that I can publish accurate routes for my passengers. So this is somebody who's running a bus company who's using that NaPTAN data to create a trans-exchange file of a bus route and who is wanting to easily be able to select between bus stops. And I've used Mike and Amy and Travelline as an example of our journey planners, but as a journey planner, as Mike and Amy running Travelline, I want to be able to easily search routes and stops from the passengers' inputs so that I can accurately direct passengers to the best route to take between places. So one of the things that Mike and Amy need is information about where those bus stops are in a way that people will type about it, and having that information. And me, I got to write one of these for myself. As the service owner of NaPTAN at DFT, I want to ensure the NaPTAN data we publish is of the best quality so that data consumers trust in NaPTAN data. So one of the things that I'm starting to look at is how do we, without manipulating NaPTAN data, indicate to people what are good fields to use, what are fields that can be used but only in particular areas, and what are fields that we might want to avoid. That is partly some of what I'm starting to think, because I'm looking at consistency, accuracy, and completeness across some of these data fields, across not just within a local authority, but across multiple local authorities in the area, whether they're linked up or whether they're across the country. Because we also need something that works in Scotland, works in England, works in Wales. It works all across all of those boundaries, which is, again, extra fun. So with that kind of larger idea in mind, there are two things that we're currently implementing around data quality. The first one is non-passenger stops, and I will quickly run through this because this is something that's starting to roll out. So why do we need some non-passenger stops? Well, there's two reasons, one of which are international passenger stops and the other which are actual non-passenger stops. So from the data that we've been working with BODS and a little bit with TNDS, is there's two types of stops that are needed to schedule services that will not serve passengers. The first one is bus depots, where a driver collects their buses and then drives to the start of a route. There is a dead time on published schedules between somebody picking up a bus and then running that arriving at that first stop, which needs to account for the time for the bus to go to and from the depot to the first stop of the passenger schedule. Now, I know that this is something that there's some algorithms and ABODs and in BODS trying to take account of this. And one of the reasons that we recognise these depot stops were needed is to actually allow that time to be accounted for, and to allow for that time to be in there to allow the prediction at that first stop of when the bus will arrive. If the bus is late leaving the depot, then we know that it's going to be it's probably going to be slightly late arriving at that first stop. These are needed so that schedule adherence and AVL can align at the start and end of a scheduled route. So this is just to help people who are driving from a depot to that first stop. And then the other one is mostly for coaches, which is about drivers' rests. So coaches are based on drivers' hours and run and not scheduled hours of the services. Driving long distance requires breaks. These are scheduled at motorway rest stations and similar. Passengers cannot alight or disembark at these stops. They will continue their journey. Now, this is that very technical thing of a passenger can leave the coach, but they get back on the same coach. They don't break their journey. They don't transit. They don't do anything. They are literally the coach is stopping for a certain period of time. But we need those drivers' rests to be accounted for and to be added into the services so that schedule adherence and AVL can be managed along for coaches as well. And then the other one, the other non-NaPTAN stops that are needed are international passenger stops. So this is where you're running a bus or a coach into another country. Now, it's mostly coaches, as far as I can tell. I don't think there's any buses that anyone runs that runs into another country. And these are stops outside of NaPTAN's geography. These are international. There's NetX. There's all other kinds of stops. So these should not be part of the non-passenger data set. Does that make sense, kind of breaking it into those two? I'm seeing Robert and Andy nodding, so that's brilliant. I'm not going to go through an exhaustive detail in all of the different users. I will just do a very, very quick one on John, who does it all. John needs to be able to tell a bus operator that a non-passenger stop should not be in my local authority's NaPTAN. So these are NaPTAN stops that won't be published in the NaPTAN data set, but can be used within BODs, within your TransExchange files for these specific things. So we don't need to hold them. So I'm trying to take that pressure away from us all to manage the craziness of needing 16 depot stops and things like that, because we don't need to publish them. The 999 stops are all going to be managed by bus operators themselves. What support do I need to provide to a bus operator for non-passenger stops? Simply put them in as 999, and that's all you need to do. We're doing something incredibly simple there. And what support do I need to provide to a coach operator? Exactly the same. Just put it in as a triple, so it starts 999, and then whatever number they need or they want, and then they can use that to publish their schedules. Dan, you're going to ask me a very difficult question, I know.
No, I'm going to ask a hopefully not a difficult question. I guess NaPTAN stands for National Public Transport Access Nodes. It's where people access public transport from. I'm just trying to work out what the value is in coach depots and things like, not coach depots, but motorway services, because actually people can't access the transportation in those. I don't know. It's not something that's coming particularly from maybe yourself, but I'm trying to work out what the point is of having this. And the international stuff, will it have that long for where it actually sits, or will it just be a generic code just so it doesn't break compliance as part of things?
Right. Why do we need them? Because BODs need them. And I am trying to provide a solution that doesn't put extra weight on local authorities. So trying to find a way to do the stops that aren't passenger stops, these are non-passenger stops. What I'm trying to say is they're not held in NaPTAN as a data set, but we need to hold them within NaPTAN as a numbering set, so that people like yourselves can go, oh, it's a 999 stop. This is a stop that I don't show to any members of the public. The international stops using NetX and whatever, they should always come with a lat long. But it's allowing people to create those TransExchange files that literally have that have a stop number, because they can't get a stop number from me. They need to have a stop number they should use the NetX stop number, which should also give them the latitude, longitude. They may need to provide, they wouldn't need to provide an Eastings Northings because it's in Trans-Exchange. So none of this needs to come into NaPTAN and into the NaPTAN schema. Does that make sense of it a little bit, Dan?
Yeah, I guess it does a little bit. I guess I'm thinking about like Flixbus, for example. So we've got lots of services in Flixbus because we look at coach data ourselves, and not some of they just assign a GUID ID to it, and to each one of their systems there's a GUID, which is a lovely complex 20-string character thing, and so but it kind of makes sense. It's got their lat longs and the GTFS kind of file that they have and things like that, and we can choose to ignore that because we can, there's no problems with that. But then if something's like get 999 code that sits as part of it, how do you match that to what the Flixbus are referring to their coach code to be?
It's so what
Sorry.
No, it's fine. What we needed to do was to provide BODs, a mechanism so that they weren't having to write an exception for every coach company of these are stops to ignore, these are stops because they will not allow public. They are trying to alert if you're using a non-NaPTAN stop within your Trans-Exchange, and I'm saying, look, if they start it with 999, you just don't alert on it because it's saying to the system, hey, this is an exception to needing to be within NaPTAN. Does that make? Yeah, I'm trying to solve a data quality problem on both sides of where I sit, which has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, no,
it's kind of like it is so little to do with me.
100% appreciate that. You're stuck a little bit. I'm not sure what the real value is of it, but yes, no, I get why you've done it.
And hopefully the value is that whatever is published from a Trans-Exchange file, it's very clear for the consumers of a Trans-Exchange file that they're downloading from TNDS or BODs, that if it's a 999 stop, it's not something to display to a passenger, something to suppress from expressing on routes, which was also kind of part of it because I had to think about that extra use case of like 3 layers down from me. Somebody wants to show this to a passenger. How do I tell them this stop has got nothing to do with passengers? Jonathan, hopefully you've got a simpler question.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, the idea of both sounds good because I know one bus route where buses don't start appearing on real time until the bus has come from the depot to the starting point and the driver has logged into the ticket machine. So in theory, that sounds a good idea. Similarly, I've also done some schedules for National Express coach routes where we did put a driver changeover pointer to motorway services in, which was of no interest to passengers, but it had to go into our schedules. Only question really is, so how are these numbers going to be allocated and who by, and is it going to be compulsory? Because I know getting some of my small operators to do anything that involves NaPTAN, BODs and all the rest of it, they regard it as a flaming nuisance rather than something that gives any benefit to anybody. Is it going to become compulsory or what?
It's recommended, not compulsory, because I can't. These are created by bus operators as they need them. And this is one of the things, and we're just going to allow bus operators. It doesn't matter if we have 2 of them with the same number because they're non-passenger stops. So, for example, if I have Simone create a bus stop 999 Simone, and Neil create a bus stop 999 Neil, and they're referring to exactly the same place, it doesn't matter because it's a non-public stop. It's not a stop that's published. It's used within their Trans-Exchange so that they can do accurate ABODs and BODs and AVL work.
Yeah, because that was going to be my second question. Sort of where do operators get the number from these stops from? Because they can make something up as long as it starts 999.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. As long as it starts 999, that's all that it needs to be. And that was also part of trying to think of the simplest solution for somebody like Simone, who might only have 1 depot and 3 buses. She probably doesn't need a lot, but it's helping though that issue of buses not showing up on real time until somebody's logged in, giving them that headway to log in and starting. And the bus being able to show up a few minutes beforehand as
Yeah.
they're driving there is kind of the passenger experience that I was thinking that we could aim for. We're trying to aim for. I'm trying to provide enough data so that people could aim for it, I think is the best way of describing it. Does that...
I think that makes sense. Bus operators will have their depots in their schedules data already, because the dead run will be part of it. It just doesn't have a NaPTAN number attached to it, and presumably that bit of it doesn't feed through to BODs at the moment.
And that's causing that small problem for the real-time indicators of not showing up, and that is a little bit on their adherence to schedule and not allowing them to kind of account for the dead time before and after a stop. Because I know that first and last stop of the runs, because I know there's some interesting algorithms to try to account for this, and this was a way of providing a mechanism that could potentially solve it. Roger.
Hi, I'm a bit concerned about. I'm not concerned about two entities creating the same stop under different numbers. I am a bit concerned about multiple entities creating different stops under the same number. Because what I'm wondering here, yes, this isn't going to be searchable on something like Travelline, but if it's being used in ABODs, we've got an issue with disambiguating these stops. Now, if we're just going to trust the trans exchange and say that's our solution, we're going to use the positioning that's in the trans exchange file. At this point, we're effectively not using NaPTAN.
Which is exactly because these stops are not public transport access nodes. These are extraneous to the public's access of the network. Sorry, I know that sounds like a very fine line to split, but it was also trying to figure out how to solve this in a way that didn't put a lot of extra work and or create another centrally managed stop system. Now, it might be that we need to give people some blocks. I don't believe so. I think we can just get away with saying if it's 999, we suppress it. For BODs, I haven't heard them raise that question yet. So Roger,
that doesn't really surprise me, to be honest with you.
Next time we talk, let's have a chat with them about how to do this disambiguation. But it will be the same numbered stops at different locations, and that they could simply just go back and say, could you renumber your 999 stop to be another number, and just choose one and ask the other two to, and ask anyone else who's using that same numbering to use a different one. I would say, given the craziness you all did with ATCO codes, I can't imagine bus operators clashing too much on how they name their stops.
Oh, I can.
Oh,
you'll start off with something like 9999001. That's nice and logical, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's going to be bus companies from here to Dundee using that ATCO code.
I'm. So what we could possibly do is, when we push this out to bus companies, is just say include your registration number, or include your all we need to do is give them a quick digit to throw.
Yes, if we've got something to disambiguate on, if we're using not codes or something like that, and including that as part of the ATCO, then that gets around it.
So if we just
as long as they're absolutely clear that they should only use one code, that the codes for each stop should be separate, you can't reuse them across different services, then I think we get away with it. But I was rather concerned about, or if we just suppress everything. If we just say it's a 999 code, therefore it goes out to BODs, but it gets completely ignored. That works as well.
That's my primary suggestion. If it goes into BODs, it's simply there to allow for putting in those kind of non-public things like the rest breaks and the depots, and BODs just suppresses them from any of their outputs. The one place that might create a few problems is ABODs, but we could simply just do it as 999 plus NOC plus your number, and but let's try it and see, because they're relatively fast and easy to change.
Okay, let's let Jonathan have his next question.
Yeah, I think you've covered it. I was going to suggest if it can be alphanumeric, then the logical thing is 999, then not code, and then either letters or numbers after that because some operators have got multiple depots. So, for example, Ariva might have sort of 999 ARBB and then LU for Luton, MK for Milton Keynes, and so on. The idea of everybody using 9990001, yeah, that is going to result in multiple things, which is probably going to cause a problem further down the line that none of us expect now. It'll allow something up somewhere.
So,
yeah, the thing is, motorway service stations, yeah, every operator who does National Express will end up giving a different code to the same service station. So you'll have multiple codes at the same location, but that may or may not be a problem.
I think it's going to be, it's allowing people to have that timing, and as long as people are consistent and what they use within their trans exchange, I'm hoping it should be fine. I've just noted down, so it's so I'm network operator code because let's continue the habit of a lifetime of referring to ACCO code codes. So it's 999 plus your NOC code plus a depot code is the proposed solution here, which I will put forward, and I'll put into the advice that we give off to bus operators, just to make it a little bit clearer. Weirdly enough, because I talked this through with the ODPI in the ODPI public meetings, as well as the what's Gavin's one's called. There's OPDI and there's another BODS meeting with the smaller CPT bus operators meetings. Some first buses are already using 999 codes and just randomly throwing them in where they've got depots, and BODS seems to be going through okay. We've found some already up on Trans Exchange. So one of the things was just being clear as to the difference between what was a non-passenger stop and what is an international stop was the only clarification that we needed to provide to make it a little bit clearer and to make people kind of fall on the right side of everything. So just very quickly running through, just with the idea that I'll make that small change because I think that's a really, really good idea. Neil has the same questions. Do I have to use NaPTAN to create my schedules? Yes, you do. How do I include a depot? Here's how to include a depot. Dan and David, who run APIs, you just need to know to suppress 999 stops from any outputs. If you happen to pick them up from BODS or TNDS, you just don't publish them. We've got some question for BODS. How do I include depots so I can compare the schedule? How to include drivers' rest stops, and how do I include international stops? Those were the questions that I got from BODS already. We haven't had the disambiguation one, but I will add that one. What happens if I have two stops with the same 999 code in different places? Cool. How do I explain what a non-passenger stop is? And for our Cody teams is, can I view the non-passenger stops in the dataset? No, because we don't hold them. And can I easily identify non-passenger stops in the data? Yes, if we pull down Trans Exchange information from BODS or TNDS, we should easily be able to see the 999 stops, same as everyone else. Just running through the process. It doesn't exist is like my most used sticky whenever I'm working through processes and services at the moment. Just trying to explain what the difference between why 999 stops were being thought about, and the fact that these two different scenarios for bus operators and coach operators needed to be considered. I did some some analysis. So I ran through NCDS. We had some ATCO codes that start outside of the range. So we already had some 999 stops that were put in. Some of these are international passenger stops. So we're going to start to talk to people, and Dan and everyone will figure out the right wording to go out to the bus operators and the coach operators to kind of explain how to use this a little bit clearer. There's also using some of the old 900 stops that were withdrawn because they hadn't been updated since 2005, and there was no ownership of them and no clear record. Some of these will move to 999 stops. Some of these will move off into normal ATCO codes, and the 8 stops are in Northern Ireland. That's part of some of the updates that I've done on the site here. Actually, when you click on ATCO area codes, we've just updated all of the ATCO area codes, listing out, when you come down the bottom, 700s in Northern Ireland, 970 are Northern Ireland Rail. I need to put in that 800s are also Northern Ireland, and 999 stops are non-passenger stops. So it's kind of who looks after them and who manages them. So there's the full list of all the ATCO codes and what regions are all there now as well. Come back here. We just need to communicate clearly and unambiguously as possible what these stops are and how to use them. And we've given ourselves 6 to 8 weeks. This is one of the public meetings to talk these through, and I'll also talk it through in the second meeting. And the process is literally you create the stop yourself, you publish the TransXchange file. Any of the journey planners who use the TransXchange file need to remove the non-passenger stops before they publish any schedules off to passengers, but they're there when we go to analyze the system, when we use the ABODs, because they're there to allow people to match up those timings and avoid some of the weird gaps in schedules and things like that. And that is non-passenger stops. Are there any big red flags or major concerns here? It's solving enough of the problem. We'll figure out the fine details. We can tidy up some of the ambiguity that comes up. The second one that came up, and some of you were here for the meetings, is NaPTAN be not as goodly as we think NaPTAN goodly is. There are 3, we went through and found 3 fields that we are just, I'm calling it data bankruptcy. It's just, this is data that is incomplete and inconsistent across all of the local transport authorities. We found out, for example, that modification, all of London was listed as new, no matter how many times it had been revised, because London didn't change it from new to anything else. So we had some things from London that had been revised 700 times, but was still listed as new. And when some of you went and did a little bit of work, the modification was being inconsistently applied by your software as well, depending on the software and the version. And when you put it in, and when you pulled your data across, and then when you migrated, it did something else. It's a mess. A solid mess. The same with revision number. This is inconsistently applied across software and software versions across all of the ecosystem. We are withdrawing modification and revision number. We're saying, and I know that they're mandatory, you still need to provide them to us. Just don't fuss about it. Whatever's there is there. What we're thinking of doing in the future is just withdrawing these from what is published. So I know that in the schemas that you give us, you still need to provide this data. It's locked into the schemas, but we don't need to publish it. We can just publish it as blank. We can just strip it out, and it's going to make it really clear to people like Dan and other data consumers that this data, no good. Don't bother trying to do anything with it. You will go mad. I went mad for months trying to figure out what was going on with modification and revision across different local authorities. Then figured out that there was nothing going on. It was wild. And the last one is clear down code, which the technology died in 2010, 2011, something like that. We're just, if you don't provide it, don't provide it. If you are providing it, just stop providing it, because we're just going to withdraw it because it's not providing. Publishing this field is not delivering any value whatsoever. It's just an empty field that we're pushing out. So that's the now that we're working on. This is the stuff that we're implementing now, we're communicating out now. The next bit that we're going to work on is that stricter text validation. Now, some of you might remember that I talked about the fact that there are more than three free text fields in NaPTAN, but only 3 of them currently have any validation on them, which means occasionally somebody will put in a Welsh letter, and that will turn into, because plain text is not plain text is not plain text, in ANSI 8 it will turn into some random character, and because we don't have checking on that plain text field, we will end up publishing a file with a funny little character that causes a break for somebody, and then I have to go back to Tansy and go, oh, by the way, these couple of fields, could you go and just retype them because your Welsh thingy has turned into this weird set of characters. So we're going to turn on character validation for all text fields. I will publish what we're including and what we're allowing and what we're not allowing. We will be allowing slashes and verticals, because we know, especially in common name for a lot of you, using slashes or verticals, pipes or forwards and backwards slashes has been used for a long time. Even though within the schema it was said, we don't recommend you use it, you needed to use it because you needed to do that differentiation between, like, we use it around here, Elephant and Castle, Old Kent Road, Elephant and Castle, New Kent Road. You know, it's a nice little indicator to say where you're going to be. So we're going to turn that on, and I will let you know exactly which characters we're allowing and not allowing, and I will ensure anyone who's going to be tagged in the not allow, I'll send you a list of, here's the ones that you will need to change, or your files will start erroring as you upload, because we'll block them for having these fields in. Then the stuff that I'm researching currently at the moment, we have locality. Don't worry, I'm not touching locality just now. I want to fix the gazetteer, but I'm not touching it right now. But we also have town, suburb, and crossing. Now, one of the things that I'm trying to figure out, and I get a sense this might be, there's 150 ounces to this, but what is a town, what is a suburb, and what is a crossing, and what does Dan, who's our only data consumer here, and Pete, who's also a data consumer, what do you think a town, suburb, and crossing are? Because I get a sense it's not applied equally across local authorities, and these may be fields that might not have the fullest value that we would anticipate.
I don't really use that information much. I get it from other kind of boundary information, other geospatial data when we're doing stuff. So yeah, I don't really use the kind of locations given in it. Sometimes it's quite useful when you're viewing it to see what the town is, but I don't really use it in any kind of processing. It's more of a visual kind of check of where something is. Usually we use the locality or the ATCO code to work out where it is, and then we use other data such as OS boundary line data or something like that to drill down into more specifics.
Pete, do you use these at all?
I don't tend to use them much as a data consumer, but I have just downloaded NaPTAN quickly and seen that nobody has inputted anything for crossing unless it's just not going through in the download, perhaps. But crossing is completely empty for every single NaPTAN entry, apparently.
Again, yeah. There's a few in there, but which I think I found in the XML, but I could be wrong. But it's kind of one of those ones of like, do we even need this field anymore? Is it one of the ones that we can just quietly stop publishing? I know you may need to give it to me because of the way your software works, but if I can quietly suppress these files, these fields, the same way as we suppress the notes field, I want to quietly start suppressing fields that aren't delivering quality so that it's easier for the data consumers to make sense of the data. There aren't empty fields where they think they should be getting data. And it's just going to make the data files that they're consuming a little bit smaller as well, which again helps with many things. Andy, Tansy, Jonathan, people what create NaPTAN. Do you use town suburban crossing in anger? Because Andy, my biggest worry is you're going to go, well, Travel Line Southwest has this amazing facility where I use these amazing fields and do marvelous things with them. No, I see you shaking your head.
I don't even think we upload. I don't think we have it in our upload, to be honest.
I don't think you do, but I just wanted to make sure, because I know that you. Sometimes I look at fields and you're like, oh no, we use it in Travel Line Southwest and I do this with it.
We don't use them in Wales, as far as I'm aware. So.
Tansy, I didn't think so either. I've done a little bit of research. Right, throwing it to Roger to tell me he uses it.
We occasionally use crossing. And the cases where we use it are where the landmark is something like the Doctor's Surgery or the Three Feathers, but there is a crossing street which would also make a good landmark. So we include that in case the Doctor's Surgery closes. And it's just a reminder to us that is there and can be immediately used. We don't use suburb, we don't use town because they're too hard to define.
Do you want to know one of the fun things? I almost included landmark here, but I know some of you have put a lot of effort into landmark, but I'm also aware that I've yet to find anyone downstream who's using landmark. So I didn't want to break your heart because I have a habit of doing something like that. Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever knowingly used crossing, but I couldn't swear that there aren't some lurking in the depths of the data I've got. Because the trouble is, the data I've got was done probably getting off 25 years ago by a contractor for a county council that no longer exists. I don't know what local knowledge they had, so I find the whole locality and everything down from that painful. I would like to review it, but as someone just said, sort of trying to define exactly where one suburb ends and another starts is never easy. Out in the rural areas, you can see a clear gap between this village and the next village. In bigger towns and cities, quite where one locality starts and the next one ends is never easy, and it does change over time. 30 years ago, nobody wanted to admit to living in Brixton, so they said they were in Clapham or Camberwell. Now everybody wants to be in Brixton. Now it's got trendy, so the boundaries have changed again. And there's within some areas there are new developments that have a name. Is this particular development big enough to become a suburb? And that's before we get onto the difficulty of actually changing anything within the gazetteer.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. I'm slowly working to fix that. I'll catch you up on the gazetteer work in a moment. I'm aware of this in the fact that I live between Elephant and Castle and Borough stations, and there are essentially 3 or 4 different names that you could call the locality where I live, and it all depends on where I want to direct someone, whether I live at Elephant and Castle, I live by Borough, or I live by Walworth. So I've got like three areas that I can clearly say that I live besides. But I live in, when you look at me under an electoral roll, I live in some kind of weird boundary area called Chaucer that nobody knows where it is.
Yeah, but that's just a name for the electoral ward. But I think some of your local stops are in NaPTAN, in locality Newington.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether anybody actually calls it Newington.
It's Newington Causeway, not. And Newington Causeway is different from Newington Green because London how dare you have the things called Newington being in the same thing as each other? Newington Causeway and Newington Green are about 3 and a bit miles apart from each other. I've lived in both of them, hilariously. I seem to be...
Yeah. Within NaPTAN, some of the locality names that got used, especially when it was done by outside contractors, they're locality names that might appear on the pink covered Ordnance Survey maps, but nobody who lives there actually calls the area that. And they've sort of been fossilised in NaPTAN, and trying to sort it all out is something that's sort of beyond the resources of, I think, even the authorities that care about these things. And as for the authorities that don't come to these meetings and don't take any notice.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I want to do in the coming years is have a look at what the Gazetteer's purpose is, why it's needed, and do we need a purpose-built Gazetteer, or can we use the OS Gazetteer? What would be the problem of doing that, which is just an entire can of worms that I will eventually open at some point. Who's next? Chris. It's different up north, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. So I inherited this about a year ago. I started just over a year ago with the council, and I inherited our NaPTAN database, and there is a push to kind of make updates on it. So when we mentioned town, I've started putting town in on some of ours, and that was partly because of how one of our local operators is using the NaPTAN data on their website. We get a lot of residents complaining that, for example, the bus stop says it's just Market Square on their timetable rather than it's Selkirk Market Square, or it's, Hoyk Mark Street, etc. So I've started putting town into some of them with the intention that I was going to try and get their providers to use the town data set on their website. But crossing, much like Roger said, we may have a stop that's, say, near a high school, and we've got the road that runs alongside the high school and there's a crossing, but there's not many like that on ours.
So, Chris, one of the things that I'm contemplating on the naming, and I ran this past Di and Amy when they came to me with a question, because I know that Miles and previous NaPTAN people had a really strong thought about not putting locality into the common name. I'm like, it's easy for you to put locality into the common name so that the name makes sense. Selkirk Market Square. If the locality is Selkirk, it's easy for somebody like Dan to say, if I see the locality in the common name, suppress the locality, because it's almost easier to do it that way, to keep the field's usage as simple as possible, and to provide a clear way for Dan and data consumers to say, if you see the locality, so you don't end up with Selkirk Market Square, Selkirk, you end up with Selkirk Market Square, and it just suppresses the publication of the locality. But this is one way of thinking about it, and I want to run this past everyone. This wasn't the intent of today. I want to run I want to run a full 2-hour session on tweaking common names to make them understandable for Beryl and Beverley, because that's part of the problem that we're facing, is the people who are coming in from outside who don't know what parts of the area are called and who don't know the area well. So they're trying to figure out a bus stop name and where it might be, versus the people who've lived there for a very long time, who know the bus stop by the name of the pub that disappeared 20 years ago, and it's now just called... Yeah.
We've got the same thing. We've got plenty of bus stops that were named after a pub that disappeared many, many moons ago.
Yeah, and it's figuring out that tension between the people coming in and the people who live there, so that one of the side effects of not getting this right is we're seeing bus operators renaming stops. So that the voiceovers and things like that, so they're naming stops different, they're renaming stops in their trans exchange files. And this is kind of like the canary down the mine of this data problem, because it's bigger than just those ones that have been renamed, but it's how do we set up a way of doing it that everyone kind of agrees with, that makes sense for as many people as possible, that allows Beryl and Beverley to really understand and talk about the same stop. That doesn't require 20 years of local knowledge to know that it's called, well, I'm going to use the Bricklayers Arms, which is just down the road from me. It's called the Bricklayers Arms. The Bricklayers Arms wasn't even bombed because it was gone before it was bombed. It was gone before the bombs fell, the Second World War bombs fell. So but it's still called the Bricklayers Arms. There is no Bricklayers Arms pub there. I went and walked around to try to find the Bricklayers Arms. There is no Bricklayers Arms. And it's that kind of thing that we need to start thinking about in terms of how do we describe things. The Bricklayers Arms is now the name of the weird, I was going to call it a roundabout, but it's around a square because it's a square-sided roundabout. But it's thinking about all of those weirdnesses that we need to describe and how do we describe them in a way that makes sense for our Beryl and Beverleys, for us as local transport, or as local authorities, and then as the data producers, but also for us as data consumers like Dan and Pete, who need to be able to download that data and make sense of it nationally, make sense of it across boundaries. And that is, if there are 5 bricklayers,
kind of worms.
yeah. And I'm not wanting to tackle it right now. I'm trying to tackle some of the solutions that have been put in to tackle it, that have been halfly put in and not consistently used. And do we need to try them, or do we just declare bankruptcy on them, say don't use these and focus on an actual fix, which is kind of what I'm trying to explore here. Dan.
I've got 3 points. I'll rattle through them quickly. I guess the first one, we're talking about common names and things like that. Is there something you could do quite simply using like point of interest data? So my local stop to where I live is called police stations, opposite and outside police station. That police station is shut 15 years ago, so it's not relevant. But you can do a very quick POI search and find out actually this is called police station. Is there a POI of police nearby to kind of cleanse that data? So that might be quite an interesting thing of doing. My second point is when it comes to like towns and suburbs and things like that, is there not a way that you can take the onus off local authorities providing that data and use something like geospatial boundaries and populate that data in a normalized way, so where Guildford town boundary sits, you could populate it and do it that way. And the third thing is vernacular names. So there's a big bit of work was done recently at Ordnance Survey that I sat on a very interesting webinar where they've been collecting and collating for emergency services all the vernacular names. These are all the names that are locally known as I don't know, I'm trying to think of one that's appropriate to say Harry Potter Bridge or something like that people know locally is that thing, but it's not the official name. Is there any way you could utilize that data and add almost an extra column that says vernacular names that brings across that? That's sort of been collected and collated by Ordnance Survey. Could you utilize that information as well?
So tackling off common name stuff. One, I don't want to add any extra fields. I don't want to bring in more information. I'm trying to clean up the data, not add data. So I'll leave the common name stuff alone. The things around locality and the geospatial data. On the police station and the POI, as NaPTAN, we don't change or transform any of the data given us by local authorities. The one and only thing that we do with the notes fields and what we will do with some of these extraneous fields is to suppress the publication of this data in specific circumstances. For example, we suppress the publication of the notes field because it contains PII information, and asking people to go through and clean up their notes from 2005 is not a good use of time. We can just suppress the publication of that field. So this is kind of the model that we're looking at, is let's suppress fields that are not useful and no longer providing any value, and produce a NaPTAN that is tight and full of valuable data that is quality and provides value. So using the POI information would be really good. We can have a look at maybe creating a little standalone tool or helping local authorities do that work, but we're not going to change it on NaPTAN. And the last one was what you're talking about is improving the gazetteer. That is something that future, which actually I'll put into the even later. What should we look into? I'm just going to add a little that says gazetteer, the Gaz, because it's a mess. The more I see of NPTG and the more I have to go in and edit it and play with it, it's a right mess. And understanding the layering, understanding what's been called a town, what's been called a suburb. Some of the data was done from parish, so sometimes it's down to parish levels, especially up in Scotland. It's down to very tiny little hamlets and parish levels, which may be splitting a small town into two. I don't know, but this is stuff that if we looked at the gazetteer and looked at what we need a gazetteer for, why it's useful, and where the best boundaries are. Does Ordnance Survey with its vernacular layer of information help us sort this out, or is this something that we need to put into NPTG, or how do we resolve this? Because looking at what NPTG does and how it works is really important, but it's not something that we've got time for at the moment, just because of the other work that we've got on around accessibility. Figuring out, do we suppress some of these fields, is stuff that we can do, because turning on a suppression is relatively simple, and turning on strict validation. But it's looking at the things. So this locality comes from the gazetteer. Just take that out, edit this locality from Gaz. So that should be giving us a layer of town and suburb if the gazetteer was set up correctly. If is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because some of the gazetteer does not match the schema in how it's intended to be used in its layering. And I have to admit that a lot of the editing over the years that have come through the DFT editing, but also we gave people an open editing tool that didn't allow you to take things out, that didn't allow you really to do a lot of corrections. And we have things like even the centres of localities are in different places, and that's some of what I also want to tackle. Should it be the population centre or the geographic centre, or where people want to go within that locality? Because some of them are geographic centres which take you to fields in the middle of nowhere, when in fact you want to go to the population centre, which is on the edge of that locality. So there's some bonkers stuff that we need to sit down and figure out in there. Does that make some sense? And John and Dan, does that give you an idea of, yes, you have brilliant ideas, no to any of them?
Yes, that's fine.
Jonathan.
Yeah, just to sort of pick up on the point of showing bus station as a destination. There's a few that go through to Google that show things that are nonsensical. So Luton Airport is one I've tried to deal with a couple of times. If you look at the departure list on Google Maps, it shows that there's a bus to Asda, which is actually going to Dunstable, a bus that's going to bus station, which means it's going to Stevenage, and a bus that's going to Central Railway Station, which means it's going to Milton Keynes. Show public isn't going to know that. I think it's something to do with sort of which field is being picked up within the operator's system for destinations, what's being fed into boards, and what Ito World are doing with it. And I need to shout at people about that again, because I thought they were trying to sort it out. But I know with some of the big operators, they don't actually produce and typeset timetables that go up on their website. It's something that's generated by their system. If you just get a timetable out that says it departs bus station at this time, yeah, fine. Which bus station?
Yeah.
Using different names of stops is another thing, especially operators that use the Omni package. It doesn't just pick up the NaPTAN name. There is somewhere within the timetable that you've physically got to type the stop name in as well, which means you can end up with 3 different spellings of the same stop name on different days of the week, or you can have it one name on Monday to Friday and call the same stop a different thing on the Saturday timetable. I'm conscious we're being recorded, so I'm not comment any further on that. And yeah, as I say, that the the locality centre, what we were told in Travelline South East 20 plus years ago, was that it should be the equivalent of outside Charing Cross Station in each locality. So in a small village, it might be outside the shop or something like that, but it should be somewhere that is rationally, if somebody wants to go to a specific town centre, that is where it'll take them. But I don't know how consistent that instruction was, and even less sure how consistently it's been adhered to.
Not very. You can see my face. It's not very consistently at all. I will struggle with language, shall we say, to describe the mess that is our gazetteer currently, in terms of just even those small consistency things of like, where is the centre of a locality and things like that. And this is stuff that it was. And this is not slamming anyone who's worked on this stuff for the last 20, 25 years, because you all did the best you could with the information you had, the instructions, the way that your systems, the way everyone was working. It's just been wildly inconsistent. And what is in the schema and what is in the schema information, what is in the schema and what is actually in the data set vary somewhat. And they vary somewhat in terms of NaPTAN and in NaPTAN fields, let alone when you get to NPTG. And one of the hardest things was you all, on the previous NaPTAN, you all used to be able to edit or add some of your NPTG pieces. And I know people are coming and asking and saying, I want that back. And it's like, part of the reason of not reopening it is it created such a mess because everyone was doing it differently. Everyone was doing it not consistently around the same ideals for how that works. But you all did it consistently, or mostly consistently, according to how you interpreted the local instructions that you had on how to do it. So, Jonathan, you probably had really good instructions on how to do it for much of the last 20 years, as did Roger. Did those totally align, or have you just slowly drifted apart? You two probably just ever so slightly drifted apart. There are some wild ones where I look at the instructions and I look at what's been done and where locality centres are, and I'm like, I have no idea why it's there. It could have just been put there because somebody did a typo that nobody's picked up for much of the last 15 years. You know, there's all of these little bits and pieces that are floating around that just make sorting out locality really hard. If we can find out that town, suburb, crossing and landmark are just not being used enough that we can suppress them, then that's going to clean up and put a little bit more focus on, so how do we fix locality? How do we fix our gazetteer? How do we get a gazetteer that's good for everybody? Do we just give up and import ordnance survey and just have the ordnance survey gazetteer, which makes a lot more sense? Or do we quietly run two gazetteers for a bit and have a reference to the ordnance survey and just slowly pull away from NPTG and reference off to ordnance survey? And also, how do I move the people who ain't here? Because that's one of the hardest things. And Chris, thank you for coming along, because this is the start of getting involved and engaged in tweaking NaPTAN and trying to make NaPTAN better for our Beryl and Beverley to understand where their stop is, to understand where to go and catch that stop, where to go and catch the bus from, and which bus to catch. So you end up going to the right bus station, as Jonathan nicely pointed out, that it changes. Roger, you've got thoughts?
Yeah, just a minor one, really. I mean, it's about the gazetteers. I think that fundamentally NPTG and OS are doing two different jobs. OS, the clue's in the name. It's all about pinpoint precision of physical features. Whereas the NPTG gazetteer is about whether somebody would say that they live or work there. Now, the problem with that is that's very fluid. It's great for reflecting where a passenger might want to ask to go to. And from that point of view, maybe OS is too rigid. At the same time, of course, fluidity can bring its own problems. But I genuinely do think they're intended for two different jobs, and I've seen people try to jam the wrong database into the wrong job too many times over about the last 15 years, especially since BODS has got going, that it worries me a bit that we might start to try to take a geospatial database and use it for journey planning in that way.
Roger, you might have noticed that I work on what's the least thing that I can do. I describe it as crocodilian evolution. I look at something and go, do I actually need to make this change? I've rejected quite a number of things coming into NaPTAN, including electric vehicle charging points and other things, just to try to keep it as clean as possible and as focused as possible. So rest assured, if I'm around, and I think I'm going to impact on BB and Catherine's brain, if they're around, the chances of shoving a new data set in to try to fix something here is going to be relatively unlikely. And it's trying to understand what is the difference between the Ordnance Survey data that everyone says, why don't you just use Ordnance Survey? And what is the purpose of the gazetteer? And if the purpose of the gazetteer is to make it easier for passengers, how do we take the data set that we've currently got that is variable and make it so that it actually does what it's intended and has the right levels of layering so that somebody can put in, I want to go to here, and end up in the right place. One of the reasons I use traveling from Birmingham to Bristol or Bristol to Birmingham is I found a suburb of Birmingham that actually, if you put it into some travel planners, will send you to a train station in Scotland if you're not careful. And it's one of the things that I've got stored up for when we start to really dive into gazetteers and gazetteering, where that search needs to direct you and how that search information needs to work and how that information needs to be layered so you end up in the right place. And I can't remember what it was called. It was something like something church, and it's the name of a suburb in Bristol and the name of a suburb in Birmingham and the name of a Scottish railway station. And if you just happen to put it into a travel planner and don't double check where you're going, you can end up in Scotland. And it's one of those little stories that I've got already to talk about Beryl travelling to see Beverly. So that's a preview for coming up tales of the two trying to travel to see each other. And that's because the gazetteer and the layering and some of the things that's there is not as obvious and not as well implemented as we could particularly want. And I say that in a very gentle voice of it's quite a mess in some places. And I'm really impressed that it actually works for some people. Tansy, I don't know how it works in Wales because you've also got Welsh names floating around to create havoc. Not that Welsh creates havoc, you've got the alternative names to create havoc, but I'm not 100% sure how your relationship to the gazetteer works.
We haven't figured that out yet. It's a problem. Yeah, it's a problem.
So
we're considering
right.
putting the Welsh in with the English.
Yeah, and
because it doesn't really have fields for it. No.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I've got an idea of a solution I can fire you that might also work. So this has been really useful. We've got 40 minutes left. I just wanted to take a breather and make sure that we're all on the same page. So we've got a real understanding of data quality and what some of the good bits are and what some of the bits that we need to tweak are. We've gone through the stuff that we're currently doing. 999 stops needs a little tweak. That's a very easy little tweak. And then the NaPTAN data quality, we know those fields don't work. We know we're going to be stricter on our text fields, which is going to help a little bit. The stuff that we're looking at, by the sounds of it, we're looking at the right things. We're looking at things that are messy, that have been applied in various different ways to fix the gazetteer. I can't fix the gazetteer right now, but I can start to suppress those fields and say focus on the gazetteer, and then the next step is fix the gaz. Now, you could say, hey, fix the gaz first and then fix up those data fields. I would rather suppress those data fields and push you towards fixing the gazetteer. I think if I do it the other way, we've got the long, slow rollout. I'm not going to call it problem. The long, slow rollout that this ecosystem is very fond of. There's a lot of people who aren't as engaged, who don't go and make changes, and who aren't aware of the need to make changes or the need to keep data up. I think the other thing that I'm looking at, just to let you know, because it came up in the ODPI meeting, was we're working on building a proof of concept using, or a pilot program using Fix My Street, for allowing bus operators to report to local authorities without coming via me, because a whole pile of stuff comes via me where simply because I'm the only place, if somebody wants to know where a bus stop is or who to talk to, that they come to me and I look up the bus stop, find its number, and send them all and try to do a joined up email. Fix My Street has that built as a nice, easy API-able solution. So we're having a look as to whether that's usable as a kind of pilot. Does this raise any red flags? I saw Jonathan, when I said Fix My Street, gave a look, and I'm like, are we not fans of Fix My Street? Or do you use it a lot already? Oh, I'll go to Chris first and then Jonathan.
So, Scottish Borders Council have more recently stopped taking reports from Fix My Street. So we've implemented, the council have implemented a system on our own website for reporting road defects, which personally I prefer the Fix My Street option, but obviously the council's made the decision that we're going to move away from that. So for our locality, for our area, and I know, for example, I think it was Falkirk Council as well, I know they don't take reports from Fix My Street. So you may find there's some areas where Fix My Street will just not send a report onto that council.
That's really good to know. The reason I'm trying to pilot it on Fix My Street is just so that I don't have to build a pilot of a little feedback loop if something already exists. But if it's going to be one of those things of it's just not going to work when we do the detailed investigation, it becomes something that we need to build as a little form where somebody can say, I have a problem with this bus stop, and it fires it off to the right person who uploads that NaPTAN. Jonathan.
Yeah, I was just surprised by the idea of bus operators contacting you about NaPTAN difficulties, because that implies that they have already tried to contact the local council and not got anywhere. Because sort of in my patch, yes, so Fix My Street is potentially something that members of the public would use to say somebody smashed a panel in this bus shelter or this bus stop post has fallen down. But I wouldn't expect bus operators to go through that. I would expect them, if there's a difficulty with a bus stop location or data, or they want a new bus stop for a new route, that they're going to ring me or send me an email. But yeah, maybe it's different in some council areas.
The tale that I am hearing is that there are some councils who are wonderfully responsive and reactive, like yourself, pretty much everybody here, and then there are some councils who just are not quite so responsive or reactive to bus operator requests. Now, we're not wanting to get in the way of that. What we're trying to do is also find a mechanism that we can monitor. So we can say, one of the advantages of Fix My Street is we can see the status of a report via their API. So we can see when it's closed. And if after a period of time, we see that a request isn't closed or isn't being worked on or whatever, we can contact the local authority and understand what's going on and kind of escalate it. That's kind of what's being asked of us at the moment, but it's still very unclear, and I'm trying to do it in the we will get involved when we need to be involved. We don't need to be involved in everything. But also people are coming to us via bods in screaming frustration because they've spent months trying to get a local authority to make a change. And we're getting it when they're very, very frustrated. And I'm trying to provide a mechanism so that we're getting them before the frustration happens and before the screaming matches happen, and get it much more in the, I want to make a reasonable request of a local authority, and the local authority can say no because that doesn't make sense. A lot of the ones that we know about are things like, we can't move that bus stop back to where it was because there was an accident at that bus stop, and the determination after the accident was to move the bus stop to a slightly safer part of the road. You know, even just having that conversation is literally enough to stop some of it. But because it's gone through so many months of frustration, the conversation becomes much tenser than it needs to be. So just trying to chill things down and provide a mechanism that we can at least see when we can see how many of these aren't being responded to. I get a sense you all are responding. You'll represent, between Andy, Tansy, and yourselves, we're well over 50, probably into 60% of the local authorities on these calls, but well over 60% of the stops being represented by people on these calls, especially when TfL turns up. You are people who do respond, who do, when you get a request, do make the changes. It's trying to figure out who are the people who aren't responding. Oh, in terms of responding, Midlothian got in touch with me the other day. For those who want to just party, so
that may be me, because I've been in touch with Donna up at Midlothian, and I was giving her details about these meetings. So
thank you, Chris, because she got in touch with me, and I was like, whoa. You ghosted me for months and now, or for almost a year, and now you're back asking a couple of questions, which is brilliant. So, yeah, because we know that Midlothian hasn't been updated. There's also another one of the things
Midlothian did an update this morning. I talked Donna through it. So she's created a new bus stop and uploaded it this morning.
Just a sec. I'm going to just have
you're going to check on me here. She sent me a screenshot of her confirmation to say it's worked. I've got it through. So there we go. I believe they haven't had somebody in the job for quite a long time. I think that's been the problem up there. Because
I'm
Fraser Leith
at job.
Fraser Leith at Travel Line has expressed an awful lot of frustration about Midlothian as well.
Yeah, I've been working with Fraser. No, Midlothian all retired just after I started, and there was no one up there. But also they last updated in 2018. This is why I'm looking so shocked and delighted.
I've kind of been helping Donna with that, with Midlothian there, and showing her how to work our Novus system, because it's all a Sestran package that we use. So Chris, it's kind of linked anyway.
You're amazing, because this means that I can now stop referring to the Midlothian problem. I think it's Dumfries is the other one. Let me just...
Well, I've been helping Linda and Dumfries as well, because it's the same sort of thing. Their chap had retired, and because it was Douglas Kirkpatrick at Dumfries, he's retired, and it was kind of passed on to somebody else who had no idea what she was doing. To be fair, I kind of had the same thing here in the Borders. My predecessor, he had to go off due to ill health, and so I had nobody guiding me. I've had to almost make it up as I was going along, or learn on the job, I shall say. So, I'm only too happy to help other people out with that as well.
Chris, can I just say that if I could hug you, I would right now, because you have solved two of the longest standing problems that we've had. Is when last updated, Dumfries and Midlothian were the two that were just like the very, very end of the tail. And I can now go and tell people we've solved the Midlothian and Dumfries and Galway problem.
I think there's still a lot of work to do there on both in Midlothian and Dumfries and Galloway, but Rome wasn't built in a day.
Absolutely. And if there's anything we can do to help out, give me a yell. I'm more than happy to talk people through some of the ideas and some of the pieces over the last couple of years, because I know. And it's been almost 5 years that I've been working on NaPTAN, and it's almost 5 years since some of these had somebody in post. So thank you for kind of taking over and helping them out. That's amazing. Huh.
Yeah, well, especially for Donna and Linda, I know myself what it was like getting dropped into the job with nobody really to guide me. So I'm only happy to help them out.
Yeah, and as somebody who got dropped into NaPTAN 5 years ago, when it was on the old system, but having to get to grips of the schema guidance, the amount of schema guidance that there is, the consistency of the consistency of the information across the amount of schema guidance that there is. That's a lot of why we're trying to pull everything across into this additional info page. And Chris, I might get your feedback. I'll set up some calls with you and the two people from Midlothian and Dumfries, whose names have just eluded me, just to ask
Donna and Linda.
And Linda, just to ask questions about what else would you want on the site, and how clear is the information to you, and what other things do you need, because this is trying to put everything there so that people can, when they're dumped in NaPTAN, can actually understand it. I might even I've got the start of a video just talking through the NaPTAN structure and how it works as well, just a little bit. And it doesn't use Beryl and Brenda just yet, but I think it will. But it will just kind of use some of those descriptions of what we're trying to do. And here is a bus stop, and here's what's physically at a bus stop, and here's what it looks like in the data set. Just little things like that that'll help people make a bit more sense. I am so happy.
I'll let Donna know that you were dancing on the screen. You know, she'll be chuffed to hear that, I think.
Well, the best thing is this is recorded, so this will be up on YouTube
well, I'll tell you
forever.
what, I'll send her the link on YouTube then. How's that?
Because one of the things that, how many hours are there of us now looking, all sitting on the screen, talking very quietly or very sensibly through single fields on NaPTAN is quite epic. Is there anything else that we need to cover today? Anything else that anyone wants to cover? Is there anything else on the quality side that we should be covering? Is there another field that you all are like, oh no, you need to look into this one? Dan, I'm surprised you aren't telling me some field that I've forgotten to look into.
No, I think I guess we're a bit difficult because we kind of infill data, like, you go back to where people are looking journey planning from and to. People aren't looking to go to a particular stop, are they? And they're looking to go to a destination or a POI or something like that. So
or a postcode.
Or postcode or something like that. So we kind of put that kind of information in, but we do that. That's the added value that we do. So whilst you have the NaPTAN that is kind of there, the extra value is putting that kind of intelligence behind it. And so all we really ever use is the common name, which is the biggest bugbear, because referenceable names, we've covered that already, and then the location, so the easting northing, and the NaPTAN code, and that's basically all we need. And the rest of the stuff we generally get elsewhere. But then we're more probably advanced. The company called Basemap are all about mapping, so that's kind of our wheelhouse. But other people maybe not so much. So that's where I think the gazetteers and things that become a lot more important.
Pete, is there any of the fields that we've talked about that you're like, ooh, you haven't mentioned this field, and I know that it's pretty ropey, or I've seen some of the data go a bit wild?
Give me 2 seconds, just going to reload it. There was a few that I've noticed that are still not being used, though maybe that's just not being used in the CSV. I know you speak about that sometimes, but default wait time doesn't seem to be getting used in the CSV.
Yep. And I can
if nobody's using it, it could probably be gone.
Yep. And the other one is stop timing type or something.
Yeah, timing status. That seemed like a bit of an odd one, considering operators are putting that in themselves in the trans exchange files as part of BOBs.
Yeah.
Those two ones I've noticed aren't necessarily being used much, and it's creating a general annoyance every time I re-download the CSV and I have to delete these columns each time to save the file just being too wide.
Oh, I'm not going to even start on the CSV. Chris.
It was just when he mentioned the CSV, I was going to pick up on hail and ride stops. We've got a lot of hail and ride sections, here in the borders, and that the start and finish of those sections isn't on the CSVs. I know that much.
Absolutely. So
I think there's a lot of work still to happen on how hail and ride sections are going to work with like the travel line and such like.
Yeah. So ignoring hail and ride, talking CSV file. The CSV file was created way back in the early 2000s to solve a problem, which was XML is hard for people to parse into other systems. So they created 17 linked CSV files in a zip that could then be unzipped and put into a SQL data set. Now, that broke a long time ago, and one of the things that we found out when we were looking at the migration from the old system to the new NaPTAN system was of those 17 files, there were 4 of them, I believe, that were coming up as 0 bytes or 12 bytes because they were literally broken, and they had been broken as far back as I could find records. They'd broken around 2010 during one of those early migrations, and nobody got them fixed. So essentially, the CSV file could no longer form what they were functionally intended to do because they couldn't actually create a SQL database of the data set. When we did the migration, we looked at all the different data, all the different CSV files, and we only produced one, which was the stop CSV. There's 3 or 4 other linked ones that we could have produced, but we just ended up producing stop CSV. The XML contains all of the data. The CSV file only contains the 2.1 version, so it downgrades everything to 2.1. So if it's 2.4, it throws away data and information, and doesn't report it across. So it only does 2.1, and it only does the stops. So one of the things that I've been thinking about, I'm not going to say looking at because that implies being deeply in it, thinking about is how we give you the data that you want in the CSV file. So you're using the CSV file like I do for doing quick mini reports and seeing things about that particular local authority. Is there a better way of doing that than getting you to download a CSV file, put it into some CSV reading system, and then playing with it and throwing away fields and doing all manipulations? Could we just give you a really nice little business intelligence reporting doodad that allows you to look at a local authority and look at the stops within it using the proper richness of the data that's sitting there? That is something that I'm thinking about. When Haraj and Hannah were here, we thought we had a solution to this. We did a very quick and dirty and went, oh look, business BI, Microsoft BI kind of works, but that only worked inside of DFT because it's not a licensable thing that could be shared outwardly. So that went kind of on the back burner, but it is one of the things that would allow Pete, Chris, everybody to kind of look at your local authority and to get that richness of information in the right way. And then added to that is some combinations of information that are actually hard to do unless you've got access to huge data tables. So I've got access to both the entirety of BODS and the entirety of NaPTAN and the entirety of TNDS. And I ask the team to run things for me, like, tell me how many stops in this local authority have no bus services. And they just run and they're like, oh, that's really easy. It's part of this thing that we run. Here's that report, and it's a 2-minute report. That would probably be useful to a lot of you. How do we do that? How do we surface some of the stuff as some of the stuff that I'm starting to ponder on as well? Because the CSV file is being used not for its intended purpose. Its intended purpose is no longer even possible. And it's like, what's a better way of doing this that allows you to get that information. And Dan's going to go, come use my product because I can do all this already, and I make magic happen with data.
No, not necessarily. No, I was just thinking about other types that I'd like to use in NaPTAN that I don't use at the moment, and what the barrier is there. And one of them is the bus stop type. And I just feel that whilst that is populated all the time, I'm trying to work out, is there something we can do on that to expand the field types and things like that? Because there's more information, and maybe this ties more into the accessible information or something like the work you're doing there. But I'm not sure if there's more information we can give as a quick summary at a stop. That might be interesting, because there's quite a few customs in there and things like that. But doesn't mean anything if you have a custom stop type. What does that even mean? So I'm trying to work out if there's anything you can do, or any kind of stuff we could do to kind of expand on them inputs. Might be quite a useful thing. Things like prevalence of real-time display or anything around that sort of level might be an interesting way to go if you're looking at enhancing the quality of the data within NaPTAN.
That sounds really interesting, and some of it will be tied up in A+ NaPTAN, and some of it is there. Oh, also default wait time and timing status. Thank you for bringing those up, because they are also they change depending on the service that runs through the stop. So they're service dependent, not stop dependent. So if it's a primary timing stop for one service, it might be a non-primary timing stop for another. There might be a default wait time of 2 minutes for one service and no default wait time for another. So it's a bit like those two are, I don't know why they're in NaPTAN, because they're actually trans-exchange fields, or more trans-exchangeable fields. Bus stop type, I think we could do a little bit more about defining how we call things a little bit, and just helping people understand what the differences are. And also on the hail and rides, yes, I know the CSV file only shows the start and not the end, or the end and not the start. I can't remember which way around it is, or the middle. This is also some of the stuff that we need to kind of put in to whatever reporting solution, so that you can actually get the right information about the hail and rides. But it's all there in the XML. It's just not produced in the CSV. So one of the things that I've been trying to say to people, including my team, is I know the CSV file is easier to use. Use the XML, because it's actually the better one to use. Or one of the things that we're looking at is maybe producing a JSON file, which is a lot more usable than XML. And if we produced a JSON file, would people like it? And there's a whole pile of people going, who's JSON and why do we care? And then there's a number of people going, that sounds really good. So I know JSON files is quite a divisive, or not divisive topic. It splits people into two camps. Those who know the details of a JSON file. It's essentially, as far as I understand, it's a funky CSV, but you can't just open it with a CSV file reader. But it is a slightly more modern, usable, less arcane version of the data that's in the XML, and that's some of what I kind of want to have a look and see if we can do something there. Dan, you have thoughts?
JSON's quite good. We use JSON quite a bit. It's not too dissimilar to an XML in a way. You just have a tag, which is the start of a JSON, and then you have all the relevant information that sits within that. But I think the biggest advantage of a CSV is Excel opens it, and that's what everyone likes to have as part of a CSV file. I think in JSON, that you have specific viewers loading into database. It's not easy for a data consumer to view anything, but a CSV is just very, very simple for people to do, and very easy to load.
Do you want to know a secret? Excel doesn't open our CSVs very well, because it always drops the leading zeros. It always drops the leading zeros. Not to say that it's the only solution, because there are many different solutions, but I use Google Sheets a lot because it allows me to ignore. It's got a very quick setting which ignores it. I have opened stuff in Excel and gone through every column and told it to just treat it as plain text, and gone back to the file a month later and found it suddenly dropping zeros.
So
Why it
that's
does
an
that,
interesting
I do
point.
not know.
So you can do maybe this is actually an interesting point because you can do something that tells the field type. It goes and sits alongside a CSV file, so you can actually provide. I can't remember the exact name of it, but we do it for one of our products, and it says this column name is a text field. So then Excel knows not to truncate it. It's a guide file or something like that. So maybe that's something you could add as part of it. So then that fixes all the Excel problems for everyone.
Or I could just provide a slightly better reporting solution than providing a file that only provides partial data and I won't say mangles the data, but is not giving all of the data that people need, and a file format that means you've got to do a lot of extra work rather than just a good reporting interface. Pete, save me from myself and promising a nice future for everybody.
I was just going to pick up on what Dan said because that's why I use the CSV so I can open it in Excel. That I don't have the fancy software of local authorities. I am just using Excel to find stops and find the bits that I need to do. And so ideally anything that's created I would like it to be something that I can open in Excel or Sheets or some sort of spreadsheet software would be really useful.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I'm contemplating is when we used BI, you essentially have a really nice web-based report builder that allows you to build what you need. Sorry, Fred is just howling at me. Allows you to use what you need. Fred being a cat, by the way, allows you to use the fields that you need and filter and search them in the ways that you want, rather than having to download the entirety of a data set, which is 400,000, 500,000, almost 500,000 stops to find 2 or 3 stops. Is there a better way of doing it that makes a lot more sense to people, that's a lot more efficient? Because if you all are downloading and playing with data, that's a lot of CO2 in the downloads. That's a lot of data in 50 years. And this is some of the stuff that I'm starting to think about is what does 2050 look like? How do we keep this being a lean, mean data set that does just what it needs to do, doesn't try to do anything else, and is like that apex edge of the water predator. BB's sick of hearing me talk about the evolution of crocodiles, but that apex edge of the water crocodile that's evolved to be perfection in what it does. How do we stop NaPTAN from bloating and trying to become something else, and keep it nice and tight and efficient, but also allow it to evolve at the same time? And that's a tricky balance to play. I will go sort the cat out in 10 minutes time. Is there anything else that we need to cover? What I'm going to do, feedback corner, just really super quickly. Take a few minutes and just let us know what worked, what was good and useful on this call, other than Midlothian and Dumfries being updated, which is just watching me be delighted, I suppose, is the joy. But what is good and useful of these calls? What frustrated you? What wasn't good or useful? And what's missing? What's making you sad? What things should be happening? And then you've also got, sorry, I'm being howled at immensely. We've also got BB's email address, you've got my email address, and you've got the main mailbox's email address. For those who are wondering, the main mailbox now has another person looking after it, the lovely Carla, who is triaging and doing as much as she can, and then organising me to come in and do little blocks of work to solve particular problems, like updating the MPTG files with a whole pile of new localities. Now we've collected a lot of them together and got the base level of information, updating some of the different pieces. The one thing that we're not going to be updating manually is going to be the rail stations. What we're doing is we've figured out with rail replacement bus, the work we're doing for rail replacement buses, we're going to have a couple of big updates on rail stations coming up soon. We know that there's 21 stations missing. We're going to ensure that all of those 21 stations are added in correctly in the right places. Just to reassure you all that we're on it. We know that there are missing rail stations. We know you want them, but rather than doing them manually and not quite getting it right, we're going to do that as part of the new pieces of work that we're putting in. So yes, the mailbox is no longer going into a void, also known as Jay will eventually remember that there's a second mailbox to look at. There is somebody who is focused on looking after it. Dan's very happy. Andy's not here for me to tell him that information, because that will definitely make him happy. He's got, I think he's been chasing me for a number of the different rail stations to get them in. Cool. Thank you everyone for your time, your attention, your thoughts, your inputs. Makes such a big difference. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn off the recording so you can say what you think now, Jonathan, when I've stopped recording.